This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered medical or health advice. This podcast is not intended to replace professional medical advice, nor have the statements been evaluated by the US FDA or similar international bodies. We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of information shared during this podcast. The views expressed in this podcast may not be those of the host. Greetings, health and human enthusiasts, and welcome to the Regaining Health and Humanity podcast. I'm your trusted guide, Dr. Scott Johnson, and I'm both humbled and thrilled that you've chosen to join me on this fearless pursuit of knowledge and inspiration. My mission is to elevate your well-being naturally, arming you with evidence-based insights, revolutionary breakthroughs, and impactful health tactics. But that's not all. Together, we'll dive deep into the mysterious realms of human existence, unraveling the secrets of what makes us truly thrive. This podcast isn't just about information. It's a catalyst for change. Join me in confidently exploring potent natural solutions, cutting-edge health strategies, and igniting courageous conversations that cultivate meaningful connections and foster empathy for humankind. I'm here to empower you to unleash your extraordinary potential and lead a life jam-packed with boundless health and happiness. So get ready. Your extraordinary journey to boundless health and happiness starts now. Hello, listeners, and thank you for joining today's episode. If you're like most people, you probably experience occasional burnout, and you probably worry about maintaining hormone balance. Women in their fertility years may experience uncomfortable symptoms around their menstrual cycle due to hormone fluctuations and other factors. That's why today's episode is going to focus on burnout, hormone balance, and the menstrual cycle. And I've invited a clinician who has dedicated hundreds of hours to supporting women's health, Dr. Kendra Kautz. She is a chiropractor and holistic health consultant in Orange County, California. Her personal health history of experiencing physical burnout, gut health issues, like so many of us, brain fog, poor immune function, and numerous injuries from playing sports has led her to deep dive into holistic therapies, forming the practice she has today. She obtained her doctorate of chiropractic from Southern California University of Health Sciences. She attended over 100 hours in courses presented by the International Chiropractic Pediatric Association that focused on supporting women through pregnancy and the development of newborns, infants, and children. She is certified in sports nutrition and consults for UCI Athletics, educating individual athletes on the importance of nutrition for structural health so they can perform at their best. She uses applied kinesiology, craniosacral techniques, and nutritional evaluation to diagnose and treat each patient as a whole person. When she isn't treating patients, she enjoys going to the beach, playing volleyball, golfing, group fitness, walks with her dog, and learning the latest in the world of health to improve her patient care. Welcome, Dr. Kendra.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So I think I want to start out by saying, would people know that they have burnout or hormone imbalance? So what are some of the signs they should be looking for?
Yeah. So really, this is a lot of people, like you said at the beginning. So, and I see it a lot in athletes. So I would think like if you're a pretty competitive athlete, you want to already have that on your radar of how are my hormones functioning because of how much you're pushing your body.
Mm-hmm.
But chronic fatigue is definitely part of it. So you feel like you can't get out of bed, or you get up and you have to reach for that cup of coffee first thing. Maybe you don't sleep well, you have insomnia, or you wake up a lot throughout the night. That could be a sign of hormone fluctuations. Reduced performance, that's what I was talking about with athletes. Like all of a sudden they're gassing out in their sport. And if you're, assessing their nutrition and they're, nothing's really changed there, but maybe their mental stress is higher, or they're pushing themselves more. Maybe their performance is worse now. Feeling overwhelmed or like easily startled.
Mm-hmm.
is something I see a lot. And with that, actually, when patients come in, or athletes I see, their pupils may be a little bit more dilated. So you could feel more anxious, irritable, depressed. And a lot of times, like, the depression symptoms go along with people who feel like they can't get out of bed in the morning. Those people are flatlined. And we'll talk later about like different levels of burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And then headaches, muscle pain, overall like body stiffness can be part of it. GI issues, like acid reflux is a big symptom I see, especially with athletes too. I mean, honestly, a lot of people, like the business, busy moms, hardworking
Mm-hmm.
people, yeah, irregular menstrual cycles. So either heavy periods, really painful periods, or absent periods, um, weight gain, difficulty losing weight. Like, there's a bunch of symptoms that overlap with other things, right? But this really does all play a role. Low libido, uh, acne can be part of it. That's a little different, but and skin changes. Usually there's something else tied with that. Hair loss or thinning, that's a big reason why I've had patients come in to see me, especially as women. We don't want to lose our hair. And then hot flashes, night sweats. That's like when you're getting into menopause.
Right.
And we'll talk about it, but really, like, menopause symptoms are telling us that there's something wrong. Like, we shouldn't have a bad menopause. And then other physical symptoms like low back pain, sciatica, and piriformis syndrome are things that I see a lot. And I'll explain that more if you would like, or we can talk about that later.
I've often wondered, how would we treat our bodies differently if we had the same check engine light and warning lights we have, like in a car? And we really
Yeah.
do. A lot of these things you're mentioning are kind of like our check engine lights. There's signs or warnings for us that we need to make some adjustments and some shifts, and
Yeah.
so we ought to treat them more like that check engine light on the car. You obviously don't want to drive your car that way because it could damage something further. So
Mhm.
why would we continue to push our bodies and not address those things that are going on and do something about it?
Right. Exactly. But that's
Uh,
not what our society has taught us to do. Keep
right.
pushing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just ignore it and keep on going. But it's
Yeah.
definitely not the healthiest thing for us to do.
No.
Can you give a brief overview of the hormone cycle? Because women's hormones are changing throughout the month and then also during different life stages. And I don't think we've done a great job in healthcare of helping women understand these fluctuations.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so let's say you're menstruating. There's two main phases. There's follicular phase and luteal phase. So
Mm-hmm.
the follicular phase is the first, on average, first day that you bleed, and then to day 14 until you ovulate. And then luteal phase is after ovulation to then when you pick up your period again. So that's like days 15 to 28.
Mm-hmm.
The follicular phase is when estrogen is rising and you're starting to build like the uterine lining. Typically, women feel better during this time. There's always like the Goldilocks principle. Like, you could have too much estrogen and that's going to cause other symptoms and not make you feel good. But typically, women feel really good taking estrogen. Women going through menopause will take estrogen; they tend to feel better. So usually, this is when you have more energy and you're like motivated and whatever. So then same thing goes up to ovulation, but you have a little bit of a drop in hormones after ovulation. And that's because when you have, like, let's say you do get pregnant, your body doesn't want to reject the
Mm-hmm.
fetus. So it's almost like when
Right.
you go into surgery and they give you immunosuppressants. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same idea. So when your hormones dip, then your uh, immune system also like will lower a little bit, right? So there's like 2 times throughout the month where women will sometimes feel a little like maybe out of sorts, and it's usually because of those hormone dips. Luteal phase, then that's when like progesterone is rising more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like when women tend to feel a little more icky and foggy brained, and you'll start to gain a little bit more water weight, which is normal. And like this is what I wish I was taught when I was younger, because women are pretty overly critical of what we're looking like.
Yeah.
So I wish that we were told, hey, your body is going to change throughout the month, and that is normal. What's not normal is feeling like you get flu-like before you start your period, right? And I didn't even say that for hormone imbalances. So that, or having really bad PMS symptoms, feeling extremely moody, getting overly bloated, not being able to tolerate foods, like all these things, like that's not normal. But having little weight fluctuations is super normal. And like a lot of them just had no idea, or even that I work with had no idea that their body should change like that, because they're seeing their body like this and like, oh my gosh, I need to not eat right now. That's the opposite of what you should do. And luteal phase is when you should actually eat a little bit more. So anyways, but that's part of that.
I think that's really important, and why we're having this conversation is because people just don't understand what's normal and what's not normal. In society, we've almost said that, pain during menstruation is normal, and it's not. And these changes that you're talking about are abnormal, and they aren't. And so I'm glad that we're having this conversation, and you're giving us some more information that women, especially teens and adolescents, can take and go, okay, I understand what's happening to me right now, and it's okay.
Yes, exactly. Little cramping is normal. A little bit of bloating is normal. Like basically, you have to cramp to bleed. Right. So it's like, that's what's causing the contractions for you to actually have a period. So if you're not getting that, maybe your period's too light, but it shouldn't be like debilitating. And feeling a little bit more tired before that too is also really normal. Doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Like we all think that we should be 100% all the time. And that's just not true, especially when our hormones, like if you look at a hormone chart, it's like this all month long for the menstruating female. Right. So then you move on, later in life, like perimenopause. So you're starting to decline in natural estrogen, progesterone. And then menopause, you don't have your menstrual cycle anymore. And there's no more like stimulation of FSH or LH to where you would actually ovulate. So it's follicle stimulating hormone or luteinizing hormone. So the thing with this is, if you think about it, like during your menstrual phase, you're doing this all month long, and yeah, you will feel some symptoms with it. So you should be feeling better when you hit peri and menopause, right? Because you're a little bit more stabilized. That's like what's happening with when you're put on birth control. You're basically stopping those hormone fluctuations because you're giving this influx of hormones, so it keeps you here. So some women menstruating females will feel better because their hormones are more stabilized, right? Doesn't mean that it's good for them.
Right.
It means that we should have addressed the underlying root cause of why they're having these symptoms. But that's why some women will feel better. So in menopause, your hormone levels drop significantly, and they should really like balance out. Like the issues I've seen is typically if there's like some sort of underlying stressor going on to where it's stressing their body so much they're not producing even the little amounts that they should be of estrogen still. And then they feel terrible. And that's what I see most fans. So like even if it's like an underlying virus, and like a virus or a bacterial thing, or maybe they're doing something, maybe they're exposing themselves to something, maybe it's mold, whatever it may be, that can also stress their body enough to where then they're not producing enough hormone to where they feel okay. And then they end up taking the synthetic hormones or the hormone pills. Yeah.
And you said a key word that I kind of want to get into. You said stress, which it can be physical, or it can be more mental stress. And so I'm looking at more the psychological side of it right now, but how can stress and burnout affect this hormonal balance and maybe even lead to some of these PMS symptoms that you've mentioned?
Essentially, when we have stress, our autonomic nervous system, which keeps us functioning without us having to do anything about it, it's just happening. Like we don't have to think about breathing. We don't have to think about pumping our heart, right? So when we perceive stress, so you're saying like mental or, or the athletes that are pushing themselves a lot, or,
Right.
like me and my friends in chiropractic school, like we were addicted to spin classes and taking a spin and or hit class, like a high intensity class every day. And then you go to school on top of it and you're so tired from that, and then you have to have your caffeine, and then you have the stress of school, and then you have the stress of your significant other, like all these things that our body perceives as stress, um, essentially will fire off your hypothalamus, and then that signals to your pituitary, then your pituitary signals to your adrenal glands, and your adrenal glands secrete cortisol, epinephrine, adrenaline, something called aldosterone too, which helps regulates your like fluid balance. And if someone has low blood pressure, like consistently, like I used to have low blood pressure, like 100 over 70, so, and they're like, you're healthy, or 105,
Yeah.
that's good. No, really, ideally, you want it right around 120 over 80, because that's a sign that you're having like lower functioning adrenal function. So I'm going to talk about like adrenal a lot with this, because that's the main
strongly associated with burnout.
Yeah,
so.
That's with cortisol and stress. Yeah. Or if you have high blood pressure, a lot of times you're over secreting cortisol, but then your doc puts you on a blood pressure med, which has nothing to do with why, it's not helping you. So, but that's due to aldosterone. So when you're getting this signaling all the time of this perceived stress, your hypothalamus is getting that signal, and pituitary and adrenal, they kind of all go together. So aldosterone also, there's other things that'll signal aldosterone to function, but usually if you have hypofunctioning adrenal or hyper, you'll also have hypo, like secretion of aldosterone, or hyper secretion of aldosterone, which would cause you to hold on to more salt, which would elevate your blood pressure. Okay. So if you're someone, you've gone to the doctor and you're on this end and you're also hyper and you have high blood pressure, you drink 3 cups of coffee a day, you have a really stressful job, you don't sleep well, whatever, your nervous system is in the fight or flight stressed state. Okay.
Yeah.
And then if you're going to the doctor and you have this like chronically low blood pressure and you do feel kind of tired all the time, maybe you're like a sweetaholic, or you really like chips, you need all these foods to kind of get your body going, then you can probably guess you're more on this end of things. You can also kind of teeter back and forth between both. Basically, when you get this first perceived stress, you get all these surge of cortisol hormones. Oh, and when you have this hyper secretion of cortisol, this need for cortisol, cortisol gets your blood rate higher, gets your blood pumping. It increases your blood glucose levels to be shunted to your muscles so you can run away from something, because it has perceived stress. So same like if you're exercising, that's a natural, normal thing so that you don't pass out or that you have energy to complete your workout.
Yeah.
So this can still happen if you're not working out. If you look at a hormone pathway, it starts with cholesterol to make hormones. And then you have this other precursor hormone called pregnenolone. And then it goes to make cortisol over here, or it goes and makes all of your other sex hormones. So if your body is constantly perceiving that it needs to make cortisol, like you're stressed, then your body will continue to make cortisol, because you need cortisol to function, to stay alive. So then you won't have as much of this hormone production happening over here. This happens within each cell. And so this is where a lot of women will end up experiencing these hormone imbalances. So that's what I see a lot, like with infertility, with not getting your period. It's because you're not even making enough estrogen and progesterone to like create a healthy, lining. And then with the fertility, you're not having estrogen rising in order to even have those FSH, LH surges. So that's where those hormone imbalances will happen. So with these stages, like I said, there's 3 stages. So typically there's an initial alarm phase. So, you get in a car accident, your body's like on high alert. You're going to have those hormone secretions of cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart's pumping and you feel stressed. Typically, your body will regulate after that if you have a healthy functioning system. Then there's phase 2, where your body will kind of be teetering back and forth. It's trying to find its balance, its homeostasis. So maybe you are someone who's drinking excess caffeine. You're doing extra workouts all the time in the gym. You're not eating very well. You're not sleeping well. Maybe you even take Adderall, like a lot of people do. All these different stimulants, and you're not allowing your body to come back to balance and rest.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're in a stage 2. So a lot of times these people can still get out of bed. They're still doing other activities, but they're not allowing that rest period. Phase 3 is what I see a lot with like my postpartum moms. They're flatlined. So they're not producing enough of the estrogen, progesterone, or maybe even testosterone, and they're not producing enough cortisol at this point. So they can't even get out of bed because they've run out of like resources to even produce enough. Does that make sense? And it's not like nothing
totally
will be created, but what happens is if your body, because when you're stressed, your body will naturally get depleted of all these nutrients. If you're not supporting yourself enough with these nutrients, then you can't produce enough cortisol. So it's going to hold on to as many reserves as it can. So sometimes these people will feel super flatlined in the morning. They have nothing in their tank. They drink their caffeine, which will falsely, give them some energy. Mm-hmm. They're so tired. And then they go to sleep at night and their body's like, oh, okay, we're not like under stress. We're not getting fired. Mm-hmm. And then your body will start to release some of the cortisol. So then you have this like abnormal sleep cycle. Yeah.
I want to get into lifestyle because in my experience, we're conditioned as a society to look for quick fixes. We just want something that we can just swallow, and that will correct all of the things that are caused by our lifestyle. And so I want to talk about a few different lifestyle things, but I want to start with nutrition. It's the foundation of our health. And so how does nutrition, or what role does nutrition play in addressing hormone imbalance and PMS symptoms?
Yeah. So like I just mentioned, when you have stress, your body requires certain nutrients in order to even make the hormones we were discussing. So also your adrenal glands, they house the most amount of vitamin C in the body. They basically, they require, to make cortisol, your body requires vitamin C. Mm-hmm. So this is why, like, if you're chronically stressed, sometimes you can deplete your vitamin C stores so much that you end up getting sick. So people who like can't get over chronically feeling under the weather, that could be a part of it too. So getting things like magnesium, vitamin C, B vitamins, specifically B6, B12, folate, zinc, calcium, omega-3 fatty acids, iron, selenium, potassium, and vitamin D. And although those nutrients are required to have proper hormone function.
Now, another lifestyle factor that just really goes hand in hand with nutrition is physical activity. How can any type of exercise and physical activity help in reducing stress, improving mood, or contribute to balanced hormones?
That's actually why I wanted to list those like levels, right, of exhaustion. Because if you're like phase 1 or phase 2, exercise, and don't worry about is it too much high intensity. Like exercise is so good for you. It's releases endorphins. It improves your mood. You're also, when you do exercise, let's say maybe you're not eating the best diet, but it allows you to utilize like glucose stores properly. Like it's good for your blood sugar. It does help with your sleep. If you push your body, that's all good. And especially like for girls with PCOS and other things, it's really good for that, since so much of that has to deal with like insulin sensitivity and metabolic function. But if you're phase 3, when you're like flatlined, that's when you want to worry about the kind of exercising that you're doing, and you actually want to rest more and give
Right.
yourself time to like rebuild, and don't be hard on yourself for resting. Physical activity is amazing, and walking is amazing. I mean, I think most people have seen this by now, but like one of the easiest things you can do, like let's say you don't want to go to the gym and do these workouts, but just like going for walks after meals
Yeah.
is amazing for you, and helps your body utilize the nutrients that you just put in a lot more efficiently. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why that we see that people who are diabetic, they have better insulin sensitivity and glucose utilization if they do go on those brisk walks after a meal. It's causing your muscles to use that glucose, and so it's so important. The physical activity. It's the people who tend to sit for long periods of time, and they are very sedentary, that even if you're eating really clean, that's going to be so damaging to your health. So it's so important that we get out and move our bodies, especially if you want to have good immune system function, because your lymph system relies on that activity to pump that lymph fluid throughout the body. So you've got to have physical activity, make time for it in your day. Another thing that I want to just address is you've mentioned rest, but how about sleep? How important is sleep in addressing burnout and even hormonal issues?
So I usually tell my females, especially if they're menstruating in their luteal phase, to get like 9 to 10 hours of sleep, because you're in like a breakdown state. So you want to make sure that you're resting. When you're really sleep, or like meditation, I guess, is really the only time you're like resting and repairing. So if you're pushing yourself and you're only getting like 6 hours of sleep at night, you're not doing the most repair that you could be doing, especially for a menstruating female, because of how much our hormones are fluctuating. That is a little harder on our bodies. So let's say you're like phase 2 or phase 3, like sleeping in is super great. Actually, it's not a bad thing to sleep in. Just like get sleep where you can. And obviously easier said than done for moms with kids. Like uninterrupted sleep is great, but do what you can. Sleep in a dark room makes things easier. I always sleep with earplugs. I think, just sleep is crucial for hormone health. Because if you're not sleeping, you're still going to fire up that pathway that we talked about earlier. Your hypothalamus is going to perceive stress, and then you're going to keep secreting like hormones, and we don't want you secreting them.
Right. For sure. How about boundaries? How can setting boundaries and practicing better self-care contribute to overcoming burnout and hormone imbalance?
If you're not functioning well, how are you supposed to take care of everyone else, right? And I think I'm speaking more to like parents, and I mean, well, it's true for anything. Like even for me, what I do, like if I wasn't feeling well, I can't take care of people in my job.
Right.
So with boundary, I know you're talking about boundaries specifically, but usually the kind of like mindset I see in these people, they're perfectionists.
Yeah, right.
Who struggle with burnout, which is great. That got you to where you are, like drives you to be more successful. But it's like asking why do you feel the need to show up for everyone? And like really sit with that and think about it. And a lot of times, like my patients have come up with, and I've also done like hypnotherapy training, and because I think the mental piece of all this is so interesting, when people fall back into patterns, but usually it's like this lack of self-worth a lot of times, actually, surprisingly, can lead to this burnout, because you're trying so hard to like prove something.
Right.
And then you're certainly not setting boundaries when you're in that mind frame, right? Where you feel like you constantly need to be doing more. So I think it's more of, coming back to like, okay, well, where is this lack that I'm feeling? Where did that come from? Like sitting with that. Why do I feel that I need to show up for everyone? Why can't I set these boundaries, and more assess it from like that framework? Because if you don't, then good luck trying to heal your hormones, honestly.
Yeah. It's this concept really of you can't pour from an empty pitcher. And if your gas tank is empty, your tank, then you have nothing else to give. You've got to allow
Yeah.
that to be refilled up and have time to do so. And that requires setting those boundaries.
Yeah.
Many of the people who follow me because of the essential oil books that I've written. So I think I'm obligated to ask a question about essential oils in the podcast. What are some of your favorite essential oils to help alleviate burnout and even balance hormones?
We just talked about how important sleep is.
Mm-hmm.
So one, I pretty much all the time I'll talk about lavender because it really does help with sleep.
Sure.
So, and then even just throughout the day, if I have like an anxious patient, usually telling them to take some lavender or have some lavender oil that they can just smell in between is really great.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's also capsules too. Clary
Yeah.
sage is really good
Mm-hmm.
before, I like usually tell the girls to take it about like a week before their period starts to even help with menstrual cramps. Fennel also for the same reason.
Mm-hmm.
Copaiba oil, that's really good too for menstrual cramps. I'll do that a lot with like peppermint and yeah, that's really good just to stick over, if you have cramps. And then neroli is also really good. I personally like Lang Lang a lot if you're struggling
Okay.
with low libido.
Mm-hmm.
So
And I think Copaiba is kind of a sleeper in that realm because it's not one that people think of very frequently for menstrual pain or menstrual cycles. But
yeah.
reality is there is research showing that it has a hormone balancing effect as well. And so you can get the relief from it, but you also get that hormone balancing effect. And I like the clary sage because the clary sage contains really small amounts of a constituent called sclereol. And that sclereol is actually very structurally similar to estradiol. And so it has the opportunity or the ability to bind to estrogen receptors and trigger some significant effects within the human body, particularly females. Yeah, I like a lot of the same suggestions, and the oils you suggested are often some of the same ones that I'm asking people to use or recommending to people to use. I think I also want to talk about herbs and supplements. So are there specific herbs or supplements that are effective in managing burnout and hormone imbalance?
When we talked about depletion of those nutrients earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can go back to that list, and if you want to supplement with those, I usually like to just try to eat more foods with those things in
Okay.
them. But vitamin C is honestly, I'd say, like one of the most crucial just because of how depleted that does get when you're creating more cortisol, right? Vitamin C is crucial. But once again, I would just think getting it through food sources is the best. But any sort of adaptogen is great for the first phase and the second phase.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're like teetering, trying to find homeostasis, you're not quite flatlined. So that's like ashwagandha, holy basil,
Mm-hmm.
rhodiola, uh, geez. Oh, maca is a good one. I like
Yeah.
uh, Vitex for like PMS symptoms too.
Yep.
But yeah, magnesium, because that also goes with, if you're having cramps. Really, adaptogens are super important.
Right.
Vitamin C is super important for phase 1, phase 2. For phase 3, if you're flatlined, I definitely would just suggest, this is just more for education, but go work with someone who can help you properly dose these things, because uh, phase 3, you will most likely need some sort of glandular support to
Right.
help rebuild. So I think that's why like these like liver supplements are so popular
Mm-hmm.
now. I'm not saying for burnout specifically, but because people have done so much damage, it's almost like taking a glandular, right? You can take hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal supports in glandular
Mm-hmm.
form. And that would help. But once again, like getting with someone that can help you properly dose that. Yeah.
Right. What guidance do you have for women who are struggling with burnout and hormone imbalance and are looking for holistic solutions? I know you've mentioned maybe partnering with a holistic practitioner like you, but do you have any other advice? Because when they're in that stage, I think some people just feel hopeless. They don't really have a lot of drive to go and get the help that they need. And so what are some of the things that they can do that you would suggest when they're really struggling?
That is kind of why I highlighted the phases, because if you are so depleted, and it's like what you just said, they feel hopeless, they're not getting answers, they also don't even have the energy to like really go get help. And a lot of practitioners now have like virtual sessions. You don't necessarily have to go into an office, but don't just suffer in silence. Honestly, like you can do something about it. But if you are in that super depleted state, like trying to make sure you do get enough sleep is so important. Getting sunlight is so important. If you're in an area where you do get enough, or even if you just go outside, you'll still get vitamin D. But also trying to figure out the source of your stress is huge. So like taking a good look at what you're doing. And that's why I did want to mention, some of those things people do. It's like, taking HIIT classes like they're candy, taking stimulants, consuming processed foods like fried foods, not cooking at home. Do you have a partner that maybe isn't the best for you? Do you have friends? Do you surround yourself with people who maybe aren't uplifting to you? Are you not setting boundaries? Are you on birth control? I don't want to get like too much into that. It's just something to say, because
For sure.
I will just mention that because I've had quite a few new patients come in and they've been on birth control for a long time, and they don't realize that being on birth control for a long time can push you into a burnout state because it'll deplete the same nutrients that we talked about earlier. So could it be that? What else? Could you have an underlying infection or something that's causing your body to constantly secrete cortisol and put you into this burnout state? So just like thinking through your history, like, do you get cold sores often? Have you had a history of a viral thing? Do you have bacterial things? Like if you have acne or skin breakouts or constant like dental work being done, that could be a sign that you have something bacterial underlying. So it's just things to kind of like, oh wait, okay, yeah, maybe that is me. That's what I'm trying to say, enough to where someone could, maybe feel seen, like, oh yeah, that does sound like me, and okay, maybe I should go get help. Like there is something we can do about this. There absolutely is stuff you can do about it. But it's just making sure you identify that proper stressor. Going on walks, hanging out with positive people, meditation's great. And if you can't meditate, even just putting on some sort of recording and like trying to take a nap during that. A lot of people when they're in this like go state, sitting with their thoughts seems like the worst thing in the world. Like keep practicing that. Just pencil out 5 minutes in your day to get better at it. It's like working out in the gym. You can't try it once and expect to be like, super ripped from one session. Like you're not going to be zen after sitting for 5 minutes and thinking how stupid this is that you're sitting there and meditating. So, just reworking your habits, I would say, is the most important thing. Like if you're in a burnout state, clearly whatever you're doing isn't working. So, evaluate and try to find little ways you can start implementing these new habits, or go find someone that can help.
A lot of it sounds like you want people to be more aware of themselves and noticing these things that are occurring, and then recognizing that they aren't normal and there are things that can be done. And you generally do have to find that with a holistic practitioner. I'll just be flat out honest about that right now.
Yeah.
A lot of these things will be ignored or overlooked in a Western medicine system. So you need to get outside of that and get somebody who will listen to you and you can be an advocate for yourself with. So I really like being more aware of yourself and then going out and seeking that help, getting the guidance you need, because it's there are people out there who can give you some guidance and help you overcome these struggles that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you being on today, Dr. Kendra. It's been a good conversation. And like I said earlier, I really think that it's a conversation that needs to happen. I hope that you listeners are going to have your adolescent and teen young ladies listening to this so that they can be more aware of what happens in their body throughout the month, but also during the aging process and they get older. I think that awareness of what's going on has been missing in healthcare for a very long time. And I'm glad that we're having these conversations so that we're adding that context for young girls and young women and women in general to be able to be heard and have more information for them to better take care of themselves. And so I'm grateful for the time that you've spent. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better.
Thank you for investing your precious time with us today. I trust you've uncovered valuable insights to elevate your health and enhance your quality of life. If you're hungry for more evidence-based wisdom to transform your well-being, I invite you to check out my 20-plus books, all waiting to be explored on my website, authorscott.com. Don't miss out on the chance to supercharge your knowledge. Please share, like, and subscribe to be part of the movement revolutionizing lives. In a world drowning in noise and endless information, your share can be the beacon that guides others to a better life. Together, let's make a difference by amplifying the life-changing knowledge you've gained today. Until next time, here's to your journey to boundless health and unbridled happiness.